All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about absolute value equations. So you should have this packet. We're going to go through this packet. I want you guys to make sure that you're writing down what I'm writing down as I'm doing it. So absolute value we've talked about is the distance from zero on a number line. So absolute value can never be negative. So just remember, it can never be negative. So for example, the absolute value of -4 is just 4 because we are 4 units from zero on a number line. And likewise, absolute value of 4 is also 4. All right, if we look at 3 and 4, so we're looking at two different equations. Notice this one is equals 8 and this one equals -8. So we said that absolute value is a distance from 0. So no matter what I do in here, I should get a number. And when it comes out of the absolute value symbols, then it has to be positive. So number 3, this equation, that's possible. We can solve that, and that's actually what we're going to be looking at today and how we solve that. But then we look down here at this. I have absolute value of 2 times x equals -8. Well, there's no possible way that what comes out of the absolute values can be negative. So therefore, this one is not possible, meaning this would not have a solution, no solution. Now, there is a difference between 4 and 5. So I realize that on 5, it also equals a negative. However, you see that you have absolute value, but you also have a -10 here. So whatever this equals and then -10, that definitely could equal a -2. So this, again, could be, this is possible. So again, this is what we're looking at doing today. Sorry, I'll mute that email. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. This box over here is really key. So I know every time we see like grouping symbols, the first thing we want to do is distributive property. But with absolute value, you cannot do distributive property. So if I had this problem here, 2 times absolute value of x plus 3 equals 5, students typically want to do 2x plus 6 equals 5 because they want to distribute that 2. That is not possible. We cannot do that. So never, never, never use distributive property with absolute value. Okay, so you're not distributing a number outside the absolute value to inside the absolute value. All right, so here are steps to solving this. So the first thing is to get the absolute value by itself on one side of the equation. So we either add or subtract any of the numbers, and then if there's any multiplying or dividing that we need to do in order to get the absolute value all by itself on one side of the equal sign. After we do that, we drop the absolute value sign and split your equation into 2 equations. So the first equation stays the exact same. The second equation, you will change the answer to the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this down here. Now remember, with absolute value, so what happens is what's inside of this could equal +7, or it could equal -7, because the absolute value would get rid of that negative and still make the answer +7. So absolute value equations all have 2 solutions. And that's this number 4 down here. There's 2 answers every single time. Now, there are cases where there's only one, such as if your answer is 0, because 0 cannot be positive or negative. So there are definitely some exceptions to that rule, but you should get 2 answers. So let's work through these 2 examples and see, show you how this is done. So our first step is to get absolute value all by itself on one side of the equation. Well, if I look at this, absolute value is already by itself on this side of the equal sign. So step 1, check, we did it. Step 2 says drop the absolute value sign and split your equation into 2 equations. So I'm going to split this. Now, the first equation stays the exact same. So I'm going to rewrite exactly what's here without the absolute value. So 2x plus 3 equals 7. And then over here, the second equation, you will change the answer to the opposite. So 2x plus 3, I never change what came out of the absolute value, equals, instead of +7, we're going to do -7. Because again, what's inside of here could equal -7, but then the absolute value signs would get rid of that negative and make it a +7. So now we solve these 2 equations like we would any other equations. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides and then divide by 2. So x equals 2 for this one. Here I'm going to do the same thing, subtract 3 from both sides and divide by 2. and we get x equals -5. So my two solutions are x equals 2 and x equals -5. And again, you can always go back and check your work. With equations, you can always check your work. So I could plug a 2 in here. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 3. Well, that gives me 7. And then here, 2 times -5 would be -10, plus 3 is -7. Absolute value of -7 would be +7. So those would be my two correct answers. All right, let's look at the second example. Now the second example, so our step 1 says get the absolute value by itself. On one side of the equation, you can see over here that the second equation doesn't have that. I've got a multiply by 2 and I got a -2 here. Okay, so we always get rid of the adding or subtracting first, and that's listed here under A, 1A. So add or subtract first. So I need to get rid of this subtracting 2. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides to start with. So 2 times 10x plus 10 equals 100. Then my next step would be multiplying or dividing if necessary. So this is multiplying, so to get rid of that 2, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So now I have absolute value of 10x plus 10 equals 50. So now we're down to step 2. Drop the absolute value sign and split your equation into two equations. So this is where I'm going to split. So the first one stays the exact same. I'm not changing anything. The second one, I'm going to change my answer to a negative. So 10x plus 10 equals -50. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to solve both of these. So subtract 10 from both sides. So 10x equals 40. And divide by 10. So x equals 4. And then here, if I subtract 10 from both sides, I get 10x equals -60. Divide each side by 10 and x equals -6. Okay, so again, you can always plug those numbers back in, make sure everything works. But here are my two solutions, x equals 4 and x equals -6. Okay, the hardest part is to first get rid of all the extra stuff on that side of the equation with the absolute value. Then once you've gotten rid of everything, then you split. All right, so let's look at number 1. So number 1 is absolute value of x divided by 7 equals 1. So absolute value is already all by itself. So all I'm going to do is just imagine that these absolute value signs are not here. So this is what I'm thinking in my head, is just this. So, and I'm sorry, that we're going to split it. So that's the first one. And then the second one is x divided by 7 equals -1. So I'm going to solve this one first. To get rid of a divided, we do the opposite. So we multiply both sides by 7. And we're going to do the same thing over here. We're multiplying both sides by 7. So this becomes x equals 7. And this one becomes x equals -7. Again, two answers for each problem. Okay, I'm going to let you work on number 2. Number 3. So absolute value is just on the top, so we've got to get rid of this divide by 10. I have no adding and subtracting, so I don't have to worry about that. So to get rid of a divide by 10, I'm going to multiply each side by 10. So when I do that, I end up with absolute value of x minus 4 equals 40. So we multiplied this side by 10, and then I multiplied this side by 10. Now I can split my equation into 2. X minus 4 equals 40, exactly what's written, and then x minus 4 equals -40. Go ahead and solve this, add 4, so x equals 44, and add 4 here, x equals -36. Again, two solutions. Okay, so be really careful, make sure you pay attention. Again, you've got to get absolute value by itself first. We always get rid of the adding or subtracting first and then the multiplying. So let's jump down to number 7. So if we look at number 7, I have this -5, this -5 is what I'm multiplying, and then this 8 is here. So to move the 8, I want to move the 8 first because this is the multiplying part, so I do that second. So to get rid of this 8, this is a positive 8, so I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. So then I have -5 times absolute value of 2m minus 2 equals -110. Now I can divide both sides by -5. So then I have absolute value of 2m minus 2 equals 22. Then I can split that into 2. So 2m minus 2 equals 22. I'm going to split this. So 2m minus 2 equals 22. And my second one is 2m minus 2 equals negative 22. Add 2 to both sides. 2m equals 24. 2m equals negative 20. So m equals 12, divide by 2. Divide by 2, m equals negative 10. So again, 2 solutions there. Okay? So be really careful, especially like number 5. Remember, this is multiplying, so you want to get rid of the 6 first, then divide by 8. Over on this side, you want to get rid of the plus 2 first, then get rid of the times by 3. Here, you want to get rid of the negative 7, then divide to get rid of your 8. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to finish this side, complete this side, go ahead and finish up the rest of these problems. So you have 5 left. And then on the rest of the packet, also the back is blank. So if you want to do some work on the back, because I know this is not a lot of space for all the problems. And then you're going to work on the puzzle sheet. So on the puzzle sheet, you are solving down here. And whatever your answer is, let's see, solve each problem to find the value of x, find its matching answer in the answer box, decode the answer to the riddle using the letter of the answer associated with each question, show all of your work. So on the back side is the answer box. So what you do is you'll solve them, whatever you get for an answer. Well, here, let's try number 1. Okay, so number 1, absolute value is already by itself, so I'm going to just split. So x minus 4 equals 12, and then x minus 4 equals negative 12. Add 4 to both sides, x equals 16. Add 4 to both sides, x equals negative 8. So I've got 16 and negative 8 as my 2 solutions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, and I want to find 16 and negative 8. Right here is the letter n. So number 1, so this went with number 1. So number 1 is n. So I'm going to go back here, find all the number 1s, and I'm going to put the letter n there. So n, I think that's it. Okay, so that's what you're doing. Now, when I check your work, please make sure that you have work shown. If there is no work shown, I am not giving you full credit for this assignment. You have to show me work. You have to show me how you're splitting it into 2 for each time, okay? So make sure you do all your work. So you are going to complete this and have the puzzle completed. So your riddle is, what did one algebra book say to the other? I know you guys love these riddles. All right, go ahead and get to work.